It will be recorded, but it will not be.
Yes. So if obviously, if you have your cameras on, your image might be part of the recording. So if you're uncomfortable with that, please feel free to switch off your camera. So yes, today we are here to talk about problems and strategies surrounding the payment of learning disabled and or autistic artists. As some of you may be aware, this is a huge issue as benefits, entitlement, and earned income can be in conflict. Paid employment and benefits claims don't necessarily exclude each other, but the information around this is so vague that many artists are too anxious to accept payment for their work. Learning disabled and or autistic artists not being able to receive payment for their work is in tension with the idea of work as empowerment. The difficulty of accepting payment is therefore an example of the pervasive disablement that affects the lives of people with learning disabilities and autism. Theatre companies working with learning disabled and or autistic artists have been grappling with complex issues of payment for a long time. In doing so, they have developed a deep understanding of the structural barriers, but also knowledges of how to resist and challenge those barriers. So today we are so absolutely privileged to hear about the practices developed by the brilliant people from Hijinks, Access All Areas, and Mind the Gap. We will begin with talks from Hijinks and Access All Areas. After that, we will have a 5-minute break, followed by a talk from Mind the Gap. We will close with a hopefully rich Q&A. So if you have any questions, please either jot them down for later or put them in the chat, and I will do my best to moderate it adequately. So yes, with further ado, it is now time to hear from our first speakers. Please join me in welcoming Ben Petty-Wade and Richard Newnham from Hijinks. So based in Wales, Hijinks is one of the UK's leading theatre companies with an international reputation for excellence in the work with artists with learning disability and or autism. They create live performance from small to large scale for theatres, outdoors, found spaces, and now online. They have toured their work throughout the world, including China, South Korea, and the US. Ben Petty-Wade has been developing his inclusive practice for more than 20 years. 16 of those years with Hijinks and formerly with Spare Tire Theatre Company in London. In his time at Hijinks, Ben has introduced the Hijinks Academies, which offer ongoing training for performers with learning disability and or autism. He has developed Hijinks Unity Festival, an international festival of disability and inclusive arts, as well as the Hijinks Residencies, which are a series of masterclasses delivered by some of the leading theatre companies in the UK. Working alongside Hijinks artists, Ben has devised and directed numerous productions for the company, including Meet Fred. Meet Fred has become an international touring phenomenon, translated into 12 languages, toured throughout Europe, to the US, South Korea, and China. In 2019, Ben co-directed Mission Control alongside Kuli Terai, a Hijinks and National Theatre Wales collaboration with an inclusive cast of 18. This large-scale multimedia site-specific production took place at the Principality Stadium in Cardiff. Richard Newnham is an actor and stand-up comedian from Wales. He was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome as a child. He lived in Quaker's Yard for the first 10 years of his life before moving to Caerphilly for the next 19 years of his life. He lived there till he got married in 2019 and now lives in Rhondda Cynon Richard has performed live and online across the world. He joined Hijinks Academy in 2013 and was there for 9 years. He was employed by Hijinks in 2017. Richard is an associate artist with Hijinks Theatre and has performed in Hijinks projects nationally and internationally. He co-wrote and co-starred in a sitcom called Flatmates. He performed in Meet Fred for 6 years. Other Hijinks projects Richard has performed in include Sleepwalkers, The Matthew Pennell Show, Metamorphosis, and The Crash Test. Thank you thank you for being with us today, Ben and Richard. Over to you now. Thank you.
It's quite embarrassing having to listen to your own biography, isn't it?
Tell me about it.
Thank you. Richard, you're going to kick us off, aren't you? So I'm going to hand over to you. Maybe before that, I'm just going to quickly describe what I look like. So I am Ben Pettit-Wade, and I am a balding man in his, I guess, middle-aged 40s. I have behind me a wooden wall with a white poster on, with a black dot on it, and I'm wearing a green jumper. Over to you, Rich.
Cool. And to follow that, my name is Richard, and I am balding. I have a bald spot where my hair used to be. I have brown hair on the sides and a brown beard, wearing a grey top, and I look like a balding Leonardo DiCaprio. No, I don't. Okay, but there we go. Moving on. So yeah, my name is Richard Newnham, and I'll go straight into because a lot of it's in the bio. Before I joined Hijinks, I went to school in St Kenneth, and I'm in St Kenneth School, and I graduated in a combined degree in drama, media studies, and creative writing. And before Hijinks, I used to go to drama groups and things like that, but opportunities were very few and far between. No, I didn't really get much in terms of paid work. And a lot of times I went to the job centre. I remember what a challenge it was and how difficult it was, because I was basically, my lifeline was benefits. My lifeline was being on benefits. And if ever I got a job, like an acting job, because I did get a bit of TV work, you always had to like declare it. You always had to prove that, you know, you were like receiving money, and it was under the amount you were getting. And then if it was over, you had to then, you had to go through so many paperwork and forms and, appeal to show, look, this is not regular work. This is only a one-off. And it was just a hassle. And it was just, I don't think that should be a barrier for anyone. And I mean, I'll get back to that in a minute, because I want to really lay it out here. But since moving in with Hijinks, I think one of the struggles with that was that I wasn't allowed to be independent. I couldn't move out, and I just felt like I couldn't really move forward with my life, from being pressured by the job centre and the benefit system. But since then, since Hijinks employed me back in 2017, a lot of things have happened since then. Like, I'm no longer a slave to the benefit system. I can actually I've actually earned money myself. I moved out and I got married, and I got a lot of opportunities to work, regardless, without having that limitation of benefits. But on that note, as always with the morals of Hijinks, which is, to promote, our actors and to fight, the injustices brought up by, the government and fight prejudices, it does hurt me to see that there are still actors within Hijinks who suffer the same problem of being a slave to the benefit system, and sometimes not being able to work because of the benefit system, and how it would affect their lives, and the fact they would lose money and have to wait months and months and months probably until it comes back again, because they'd have to go through forms, they'd have to go through lots of back and forth. And no actor should have to go through that, regardless of who you are. I think no actor should. I think common sense should be, if you have a job, get paid, that's that. No, like, no this hassle, no this, ongoing battle with benefit systems. And benefit systems should not make you feel afraid to get work. Then that's what I feel needs to stop. It needs to be stopped dead in its tracks. We need to just let people have jobs and earn the money they deserve, and not torture people for doing something as common sense as earning money for a job, and a job that they like. I think that's about everything.
Thank
Any
you,
questions?
Rich. Thank you. I think we're going to do questions right at the end after everyone.
Okay.
But thank you for that context. That's, I hope, really useful. I think for us at Hijinks, it demonstrates, how flexible we've been able to be in the past as an organization. I think, we do everything that we can. But it's always been an issue. I mean, for 20 years, I think I've been working in this area, and I can't remember a time that payment for our artists was not an issue. And over that time, I've experienced all sorts of different ways in which to try to navigate the system. One of those ways in Richard's example was to bring Richard into employment. So Richard is now our associate artist. Obviously, that's not something that we can offer for everyone that we work with, but it was something we were able to offer Richard, and we're very happy about that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our agency today. First of all, it's brilliant to see so many kind of familiar faces and names in the room. Thank you for coming today. We kind of had a meeting previous to this, Julia and Patrick and I and Bojana. And what becomes apparent is what we all know is, we all are all experiencing this issue. And we hope that this knowledge share event and whatever comes after it will be able to have an ongoing kind of dialogue about it that should help. And we hope that our experience will be able to help others as well. So to our experience, I'm going to focus specifically on our agency, which has thrown up issues in this moment as I'm speaking. But as a bit of context, I'll go into how we operate. So Hijinks, I mean, as I'm sure most of you know, we create and make work with our artists with learning disability or learning disabled and autistic artists. And we have been doing that in a professional context since about 2006. Previous to that, we were working in kind of a community context on that side of our work. From this point forward, I'm just going to use the term artists because that's what they are. So in 2012, we set up what we call our academies, and our academies were to provide training for our artists. Our first academy was in Cardiff. It was 2 days per week. And so our artists come in 2 days per week and receive training in performance skills throughout the year in an ongoing process. Due to the success of the Cardiff Academy, we quickly started to open up other academies around Wales. So we opened up another one in Cardiff, and we opened up one in West Wales, one in Mid Wales, and one in North Wales. So we had all of Wales covered. What that meant that suddenly we were working by the end of 2015 in a training environment with about 70 artists. So what quickly became apparent is that it would be impossible for us to be able to offer opportunities for those artists to work within our own productions, our own output. But we had this group of artists who were getting more and more experienced and becoming more and more keen to experience paid employment. So we set up an agency so that we were able to represent our artists for external opportunities. And the agency doesn't operate like a regular agency would, which I'm going to go into why that is. And one of the reasons is because our artists, are so entwined, the majority of them, within the benefits system, which means that payment can be difficult. So the majority of our artists receive benefits to help with the costs of their day-to-day lives. These benefits are often tied into other areas of household income, for example, housing benefit. So the whole thing, can get very complicated. Added to this, there is a huge fear factor for families. Any form of paperwork is often treated with extreme caution and for good reason. Over the years, we have had some people who simply refuse to take any form of payment because they do not want to risk disruption of their benefits. And the risk is real. on one of our first tours with the learning disabled artists on the team back in 2007, we paid them at the same rate as the other artists because, of course, that was the fair thing to do. We did it all above board, so they signed off of their benefits for the period of the employment. But when the tour was over and they returned to the benefits office, they had to go through the entire process again of receiving those benefits. So they had to start afresh. They had to prove that they had a condition, in their terminology, that would not improve. And the example, this particular individual happened to have Down syndrome. It took around 6 months to go through that process. And of course, this was devastating for the family. And that was 6 months without an income that would normally come into the family kind of budget to be able to support individual. So we've experienced what can go wrong in a very real sense if you try and do things by the book, I guess. So what inevitably happens is you try to find workarounds that still remain within the law, technically, but they're still workarounds. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do at Hijinks for our own productions. As I said, there's been many different approaches to this, but when we kind of increased the capacity of our academies, we had to standardize what our offer was. Some of our artists are able to claim full pay, which is great. And for those artists, that is exactly what we do, of course. But the majority of our artists are not able to. So what we do is each of the artists on an academy signs what is called a permitted pay form. I'm sure most of you have heard of this. And that allows us to be able to pay them a permitted pay rate of £152 per week. So on our own productions, on our own projects, our artists in the majority receive £152. And that is, they receive that amount if they are working 1 day or if they are working a full week. Obviously, if it's 1 day, great, it's a little higher than the rest of the artists on that project. If it's a full week, it's a lot less. So it's not ideal, but it allows us to sit within the kind of framework, if you like, of what is accepted in the benefits system. I believe as well, the amount's going up to 160 something, 67, I think, come April. So yeah, that's kind of worked for a while on our own productions, but where we've hit project problems is with the agency, because where we're able to be very flexible, and if an artist is able to take full pay, great, we'll pay full pay. If an artist is able to take permitted pay rate, we'll pay the permitted pay rate. If an artist wants to refuse pay because they're still fearful about the effects receiving any sort of payment might have on their own situation, then we accept that and they still get the opportunity to be part of our productions. Now, where that becomes difficult with the agency that we found is that often organizations outside of the world in which we inhabit do not really understand those sorts of dynamics. And actually, for good reason, they have policies in place whereby they have to pay someone the actual rate of pay that is part of their organization. So one example is with the BBC. We had an opportunity come up a couple of years ago for a role on Casualty. And I think this was the first example, actually. And the situation was that the individual either took full pay or they would not be able to take the role. So they were offered the role, but without taking full pay, the BBC could not allow them to do that role. Okay, so we went back and forward. We had discussions with them. There was no movement on it at all. So we were faced with a situation whether this individual takes full pay and risks the effect that might have on their own situation, own benefit situation, or doesn't take the job. So we went to Equity, and actually Equity came back with something. So they found a piece of case law. I'm going to go back to my notes for this so I get it right. Yeah. So a piece of case law basically in which a person, it was an example of a 0 hours contracted person who had claimed a fee for an amount of work, but then spread that fee over 5 weeks. So it demonstrated that within it, legally, it is potentially possible that a person can take a larger fee, so more than the £152 for, let's say, a day or 2 days work in 1 week, and then spread that payment over a period of weeks to the amount that it adds up to in increments of £152, if that makes sense. I will share the link when I'm finished to this piece of case law in the chat. So that has meant that in terms of our agency now, when we take jobs for some of our artists for which, you know, they're receiving a fee, whether it be for a day's work or for a week's work or for a 3-month film or theatre contract, we're looking to take that fee as an agency and then spread those payments over a period of time to allow us to be able to both simply to be able to accept work for our artists in the case of organizations that don't have any flexibility, they have to pay that fee or there's no work, and to be able to take a full rate for our artists, of course. Now, there are various pitfalls and risks attached to this particular strategy. For example, our artists are getting all sorts of work now, which is brilliant. We're super happy about the success of the agency and the success of our artists, but it does mean, you know, there's a variety. Some people might be receiving £1,000 for a marketing shoot, and some people might be receiving £10,000 for a TV or film production that will run over 3 or 4 months. Now, if an artist is receiving £8,000, for example, for a period of contract that's 3 months, that means that artist is paying off that £8,000 over a full year. So their permitted work payments run for the full extent of the year, and they are not able to take any other paid employment during that period. You know, that's not fair. So it's not ideal in that sense. The case law is untested. So it's a huge risk in some ways for us as an organization and for the individuals. It's very difficult to get any sort of confirmation from DWP. And certainly there's a huge fear factor, as I've mentioned already, about making any sort of contact to have those discussions on an individual basis, because our artists would have to be part of that discussion. It's about their benefits. So there's that. And there's also a huge amount of paperwork connected to it. So it's as a small organization, it's a really, it sucks in resources in terms of people's time, which is just one of the ways that as an agency, it's above and beyond the expectations of what a regular agency might be expected to manage, and becomes untenable. The more successful the agency becomes, the more work that we find for our artists, the more difficult it is to actually manage it. So yeah, it's a route that we found, but it's certainly not, there's nothing ideal about this, I think. But it's possible, we hope. And I hope that part of these discussions, you know, we find ways of solving some of these questions around an issue like this. So that's our situation. I mean, I'm going to kind of stop there, but it's not the only thing in terms of how different our agency is to other agencies. The other area that takes a lot more thought and administration is the support that our artists need on external jobs. So all of our artists, generally, actually most of our artists come with a creative enabler who joins them. Sometimes that's 2 people, someone for daytime provision and in rehearsals, and someone for overnight. And on something like, we've got 2 artists at the moment who are involved in productions in England. I'll share the links for those shows as well. One's at Birmingham Rep and one's at Theatre Royal Stratford East and Nottingham. But the amount of logistical administration around just organising those creative enablers to support our artists to be able to take that employment is massive. And that's something currently we're struggling with as well at the moment. But I know that Access All Areas are going to talk about access to work. And so I'm excited to hear about what they have to say in this next section. That is my smooth segue.
Thank you, Ben. So grateful for a smooth segue. Thank you so much, Richard and Ben, for your thought-provoking presentations and sharing from your experience and practice. So yes, our next speakers will be Patrick Collier, Charlene Slater, and Unique Spencer from Access All Areas. Patrick is Executive Director and co-CEO of Access All Areas, a company of learning disabled and autistic artists that create productions, train artists, promote inclusive leadership practice, and consult on access and inclusion for learning disabled and autistic talent across film, TV, and theatre. Access All Areas Artist Development Program nurtures the careers of some of the world's leading learning disabled and autistic creatives as students, theatre makers, performers, and cultural leaders. Access All Areas Consultancy Program partners with industry leaders including Netflix, Sky Studios, National Theatre, and many others to train staff in inclusive practice, support learning disabled and autistic talent at work in theatre, TV, and film, as well as to co-create content for stage and screen. As well as working as Executive Director of Access All Areas, Patrick has 12 years experience as a producer and director in theatre and dance, working with companies including Grey Theatre, 201 Dance Company, British Council, Theatre Des Moines, Theatre Red, Sparkle and Dark, and others. Charlene, who will be joining Patrick in the presentation, is a humble and fun-loving person, a Black woman and member of the LGBTQA+ community. She loves to challenge people's perceptions of learning disability and autism as a learning disabled person herself. For Access All Areas, Charlene currently sits as co-chairperson on the board of trustees, whilst also being an associate artist, writer, facilitator, and consultant. Charlene's most recent work was The Interrogation, an innovative app-based show commissioned by the Lowry, co-written with Sean Dunn and co-created with Access All Areas, for which Charlene also provided most of the audio performance. This interactive audio production challenged audiences to question the causes of criminality, the ableism of language, and the feeling of being judged as a learning disabled person. Charlene also performed in Unreal City, a collaboration between Access All Areas and Dream Think Speak at Battersea Arts Centre and Brighton Dome. Our third Access All Areas presenter is Unique Spencer from London. She trained at Arts Ed Drama School. While working as a professional actor, she also works as creative support worker for Access All Areas. She has supported artists to develop and devise new work and has supported artists on tour around the UK and internationally. Recent credits include Abby in Top Boy on Netflix, Lily in Losing It on BBC, Cherry in The Night Before Christmas at the Southwark Playhouse, and Kate in Tin Pairs, difficult for foreigners to pronounce, with the Progress Film Company. Patrick, Charlene, and Unique, I welcome you, and over to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to share my screen and over to Charlene then. Let's see if we can make this work. No. Can you all see Charlene's screen? Great.
Yeah. Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, just, great, thanks for having us today. I'm Charlene Salter. So I'm a Black woman, with black short hair, blue and black glasses. I'm kind of right now wearing like a red checker shirt. I've got a white t-shirt and I'm wearing some bling, little bit of jewelry and that and stuff. But anyway, so I'm Charlene Salter. So I'm like an associate artist for Access All Areas. So I'm an artist, so I'm an artist, I'm a writer, I'm a co-facilitator, you know, I'm a co-director, you know, all of that, but the most important thing is that I'm a co-chair for the board for Access All Areas. Yes, I'm the chair for Access All Areas. And also for to, you know, the access to work, you know, it's really really helped me, you know, because like it's like it takes away all that stress, you know, all that complicated stuff that we learning disabled and autistic can't really understand. So having access to work, you know, as you know, artists that we really want to develop our work, you know, and you know, show our talents out there, having access to work, you know, has really helped. You know, all those obstacles that, you know, we find difficult and stuff and that. So access to work has really really helped. Yeah, and also, you know, creative support, you know, without a creative support, you know, I don't think what we would do without them, to be honest, because, you know, they are like our, you know, how I put it, they're like our anchor, you know, to like steer us kind of in that direction that we need help with to like, you know, fulfill out what, you know, what our work, you know, to help us with our work that we find difficult, you know, not to like overtake us, but just put us in that direction, show us in the right direction with that support. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah, so this is yeah, roughly unique. Yeah.
Charlene, do you want to introduce Unique and a little bit about what she does then? And maybe Unique you can say hi to?
Yeah, so this is Unique, you know, one of our creative support. So with our creative support, we do our one-to-one support, prepare in advance, encourage ideas, support during meetings, and monitoring. Yes.
And Unique, do you want to jump in and say a couple of other things about or how it works for you and Charlene at all?
Yeah, so every artist is really different, so it depends what project they're working at the time. So some artists will just be working with accessible areas in-house, developing ideas, which is a really lovely week to just work one-on-one with an artist, coming up with their own ideas. And then some artists will work, you know, professionally in theatre companies. And so my job then would be to work with accessible areas to make sure that we know what journey they're taking to get there, that we know that the access requirements in the building support the artist, that there's quiet rooms, that we know that where they could go for lunch, and just really setting up the day so that it's as smooth as possible for the artist. And when it comes to in the room style, that is sort of led by how the artist wants it to go. So if they want you up and, you know, involved in the games and involved in rehearsals, then that's what we will do. If they want us to sit back and just, you know, take notes, then that's what we do. So everything is led by the artist, and all of the creative support workers that work at Access All Areas are all in the creative industry as well. So it's great for us as artists to be able to go and see so many different productions and different ways of rehearsals, and build, you know, great friendships with Access All Areas artists.
Oh, thank you. Charlene, is there anything else you want to say about?
Yeah, and you know, also, you know, just like, you know, no matter who we meet, you know, for, you know, artists to meet, you know, create support, you know, it's really really intriguing because we're learning so much, you know. You know, they're not just learning, you know, we're not just learning from us, but we're learning from them as well. So it's like, it's really interesting, you know, just meeting new people, you know, that's kind of have the same like interest that we would like to do, you know, the artist industry and stuff. So it's just, you know, really intriguing as well. And just to also mention that, you know, that you know, I have a mentor as well called Heather. Unfortunately, she couldn't make it today, but you know, she's like kind of like it, and you know, without, you know, Heather there and, you know, supporting me, you know, I don't think I'll be here where I am today, to be honest. So having that support and that there has really like boosted my confidence, you know, and, you know, made my work that I really want to show and really get out there. So yeah.
Cool, thanks. Is there anything else you want to say on that, Charlene, or shall I start waffling on about some of the access to work things that make this possible?
Oh, I think they're really interested in the nitty gritty grit now. So over to you for that access to work now.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much, Charlene and Unique. I think the main thing as well that I really want us all to think about is first of all, what access to work can provide. And for us, it's this relationship. It's that access to work pays for Unique to work with Charlene, and that completely changes how we work as a company. And as Charlene said, if Charlene says that she might not be where she is without the support of creative support and mentors, there's no way Access All Areas would be where it is without our team of amazing creative support that really take away as many of those access obstacles as possible. And all of that is possible because of access to work. So I can see some of you in here who have heard me talk about this before. Feel free to go and make yourselves a cup of tea. I'm probably going to say the same things that I say all the time about access to work, but I'm going to take you through some of the rules very quickly, very top line. There's a lot more detail about it, but this should give you a bit of a taste, hopefully make you think it's possible. And then if you do have more questions at the end, ask us. You can get in touch after the meeting as well. So what is access to work? First off, it's a grant from DWP. And the important thing about this is that it is a grant to an individual, not to a company. Access All Areas does not apply for access to work. Charlene applies for access to work, and Access All Areas helps with that application. It's always to an individual. It's also, it's only for support that's related to work. So it's not for voluntary opportunities, it's not for training. Usually the payment is made to the support worker. In our case, the payment is made to Access All Areas. We pay the support workers, or creative support as we call them, and then we get reimbursed from Access to Work, because sometimes it can take months to get the money in. So if you are a company doing this, it's better to pay the support workers directly and claim it back. Won't be a big surprise, but the process is not accessible. So I think some really good ideas from hijinks just now about all the paperwork and how stressful that can be, and the stress that can cause from families. We have gone through many years of figuring this out as well, and the access to work paperwork when we started it was really stressful and caused a lot of stress. Now I think we've gotten used to it. People know what they need to do, what they need to sign, and the artists, our associate artists, understand it. So I think I would say push through the initial stress of it. It is a bit of paperwork and it's not very accessible, but once you figure it out, the rules are there, and hopefully they don't change, or hopefully they will change in the future, but they haven't for a while. The last little tip when we start this off is to use Access to Work's words, and just to say that I'll be using Access to Work's words a bit. They use words like support worker, they use words like medical conditions, and they use words that that I don't think are very social model. We don't think are very social model, but you have to play the game just so that the Access to Work advisors understand what you're doing. So if I use some words that don't quite sound social model of disability, I don't mean any offense by it. It's just Access to Work's words. Okay, and then quickly we look at what can Access to Work support. So it can give you practical support with work. You can apply for it to any kind of practical support you need. It might be, if you're deaf, it might be a British Sign Language interpreter. It might be a note taker if you need a note taker in meetings. It might be a support worker, what we call creative support, so it pays for Unique. It might be a job coach. That would be somebody to give you a bit of kind of mentoring and a bit more coaching in your work if you need it. It might be a job aid. This is a specific term that I'm going to get wrong now, but I understand it to be somebody who maybe you might need to step in if you have a long-term medical condition, for example, that means you need to take some time off work because of fatigue. You could have a job aid who steps in for a few hours to cover you, and that could be covered by access to work. To be honest, we don't use that one, so I'm a little bit fuzzy on it, but there's lots of information on their website on that if it's for you, or email us or email Disability Arts Online, who do a lot of work with job aids as well. They can also give you advice about managing mental health at work, and they can cover some costs for example, potentially for specified therapy. They can cover some costs if you have something related to work that you need managing on that. They can also, and this is really important, they can give you support at job interviews or auditions. So while it does have to be for work, it can also be used for an audition, even if you haven't got the job yet. So if you're a learning disabled or autistic actor and you want to have a creative enabler or creative support at an audition with you, Access to Work will pay for that. Or similarly, if you're deaf and need a sign language interpreter in an interview, Access to Work will pay for that. It can also pay for travel costs. That's the other big way that we use it. And the other thing that's not on here actually is that it can pay for technology. So for example, if you're dyslexic and you need a screen reader, it can pay for the cost of the screen reader. It could pay for a dictaphone for you. They always try to give you, Access to Work will usually try to give you a technological solution to fix everything. And of course that never works. So we always push for support worker, travel costs, that kind of thing. Yeah, so going back up here on this, so for support workers, let's say, for example, Charlene worked for 100 hours in a month. Access to Work won't cover a support worker for 100 hours. They'll only cover it for 80 hours. So they'll cover 80%, support worker for 80% of the time that Charlene works. If it's a job coach or a job aid, they only cover 20% of the hours worked. Oops, sorry. So it's really important. Oh, sorry, if it's a job coach, it's 20% of the hours worked. Job aid is a little bit more specific. It's really important if you're putting in an application to Access to Work that you say that, and you want somebody like Unique to work with you, that you say you're applying for a support worker and that you need one-to-one support, and it's for all 80% of the hours that you work. Sometimes they try and say, oh, you just need a job coach. They'll support you for a little bit. They'll teach you how to do your job and then they'll leave you alone. That's not usually what works in our case. We always push for the support worker. Okay, who can get it? You can get Access to Work if you are disabled or if you have a physical or mental health condition that means you need to support to do your job. This is just off the Access to Work website. So this is the kind of main thing. It's for disabled people who need support in work. You need to be 16 or over, and then you need to be either employed or self-employed. We'll look at the turnover in a minute, but you have to be employed or self-employed. You can get Access to Work if you're working and on benefits. There are specific rules, and that's a little bit, we'll give a little bit of focus to that today, because obviously that's what we're here to talk about today. But even if you are on benefits, you can still get Access to Work to support the work that you do. You don't usually need to give medical advice, medical evidence. They don't usually ask for doctor's evidence or anything like that, except for travel. If you ask for support with travel, they'll ask for a doctor's note, just to say, you ask the doctor to say, yes, I can confirm that this person can't take public transport and therefore needs Access to Work to pay for taxis, for example. There may be other specific times you need medical evidence, but we've never come across it. The only time we've had to provide it is for travel. Okay. Yeah, and the last bit on that, as I said before, it's not for voluntary work and it's not for training. So unfortunately, you can't get Access to Work if you're not paid yourself, and you can't get it as part of education. The only time you can get it if you're not paid is at an interview or audition for a paid job. Okay, so there's a couple of slight difference in the rules of access to work based on whether you're self-employed or based on whether you're employed. So if Charlene, for example, was a self-employed artist, the rules for her are slightly different compared to if she was employed as an employee of Access All Areas. So I'm just going to look at that for a second. If you're self-employed, it is a little bit more complicated. There is a lower earnings limit for self-employment, which is currently £6,240 a year. What that means is, if you're self-employed, you have to earn just over £6,000 a year in order to qualify to get access to work. If you earn less than that and you're self-employed, you won't get access to work in most cases. It's important to say that this is turnover. So what I mean by that is, if you work as an actor and you get £100 a day for a job, but let's say you have to pay your agent £20 of that. So the agent takes 20% and the money that you get into your bank account is £80. The turnover is the full amount. So that the turnover is the £100, the initial amount that you earn before any expenses. So that can make it a little bit easier to reach that threshold if you're an actor. It's all of the money that you earn, not the money that you take home after expenses. The good thing, and this has been very useful for us, is that it doesn't apply in your first year of being self-employed. So if you're a learning disabled or autistic actor, and you're just thinking about starting to do a new job, and you want to get access to work support, and the job that you're being offered is maybe only a small amount of work, so you're not sure you'll earn that £6,000 in the first year, that's okay. You can tell them that it's my first year, I'm just starting out in this business, so I'm not going to quite earn this year, but in the future I will. All you need to do is have a unique tax reference number. So you have to be self-employed. You have to be registered as self-employed. And you have a business plan or an actor's CV that says, in the future, I'll make some money. This is a good thing as well for actors or performers, though. You don't have to have a full business plan. So a business plan what they might usually ask from most people is to give us a plan as a self-employed person over the next 3 years of how your business is going to grow. If you're an actor, you just have to give them a CV. And what Access All Areas has done is that we use upcoming contracts as evidence that work is coming in. So if, for example, somebody hasn't earned £6,000 a year before, and they've just registered as self-employed, so they have no previous submissions to HMRC, we send Access to Work the actor's CV, but then we say, but look, these are all the contracts that they've got coming up with us as workshop facilitators or actors or whatever else. So we're proving that they will actually work. Basically, Access to Work just wants to see that you're actually going to get a good amount of work. Yeah, so that's why they ask for that. Cool. So yeah, I'll share these. I know this is a lot of information. I'll share these slides at the end as well, and maybe Bayana, you can circulate them. But that's the main points for self-employment. Employment is easier. If you're on an employed contract, it's easier. There is no lower earnings limit. You just need an employment contract. So to put this in the real world example, if you're a learning disability arts company and you're thinking of hiring a learning disabled actor to work half a day a week to run a workshop session, maybe, for example, for the year, but you're worried they won't meet that £6,000 threshold because that's the only work they're going to do. What you could do is to employ them for that. So put them on an employment contract as a member of staff, and then they will be able to get access to work. They'll be able to have somebody like Unique to support them in the sessions. There's no lower earnings threshold. They just need that employment contract. And that's basically so Access to Work sees that it's a real job, that it's ongoing. So yeah, that's why they ask for that. We usually don't do it. We usually work on work with self-employed actors, but more and more we're looking to do this because it just seems to take out some of the hassle, to be honest. Okay, so that's employment and self-employment. Now let's look a little bit at Access to Work and benefits. So when I'm talking about benefits here, I mean universal credit or employment supports allowance. They're the two benefits that impact whether or not you can get access to work and how. I'm not talking about disability living allowance. I'm not talking about PIP. They're completely separate. You can get disability living allowance, you can get PIP. It has nothing to do with access to work. So the first thing is to consider, some of you might have noticed, consider if you're self-employed, consider that lower earnings limit. To get access to work, you have to earn just over £6,000 a year if you're self-employed. But if you're employed, there's no lower earnings limit. So if you are on benefits, I'm not going to go into the detail of the work allowance now. Some of you might be familiar with it. I'll touch on it in a minute. But there's a balance, which I'll come back to, between being self-employed, earning just enough to get access to work on the lower earnings limit, but just underneath the £152 a week per year that Ben mentioned from Hijinks. We'll come back to that in a sec, but just consider that lower earnings limit. If you're on universal credit, so this is just to get access to work. If you're on universal credit, it's not an obstacle to getting access to work. There's nothing extra you have to do. What will happen is access to work will just see that you work. Universal credit will see that you work, and if your benefits reduce a bit, then they might reduce a bit as they do in universal credit, but it won't affect your access to work application. If you're on employment support allowance, which is the other type of employment benefit, you need to have a permitted work form or a supported permitted work form, the PW1 form, in order to get access to work. Sorry, this is a little bit paperwork and complicated, but if you're on employment support allowance, to do an access to work application, you have to have submitted a PW1 form to the DWP. They will be able to see on your benefit system whether you have that or not. So make sure you do that at the same time as you apply for access to work if you have never done it before. This is only if you're on employment support allowance. It's not if you're on universal credit. You don't need to worry. Universal credit is an easier system to work with. And then just a couple of little things to think of. You might not, and this is a might not, get access to work if you're on employment and support allowance. Again, if you have the PW1 form for supported permitted work, you can get it. So it's fine then. And then if you have severe disablement allowance, income support, national insurance credits, or incapacity benefit, most of these are outdated. Most of them have been replaced by universal credit or employment support allowance. So you don't really need to worry about these, but just in case it's relevant for anybody, I would say if you have any of these, dig into the rules. Doesn't mean you can't get access to work, but there just might be some complications around it. So dig into the paperwork, the rules on the government website. Okay, so almost there. I know this is a lot of info. It's really important with this to say that you can work a certain amount and still get benefits. Ben touched on it from Hijinks in terms of employment support allowance. So we're just going to look at that now because it's relevant to access to work as well. So if you get universal credits, this is the work allowance that you're allowed to work. First of all, there's no limit to the number of hours you can work. If you're on universal credit, you can work as many hours as you want, and it won't automatically cancel. And then you can earn a certain amount before it affects your universal credit payments. You can only earn that certain amount, that work allowance, if you're responsible for a child or a young person, or you're living with a disability or health condition. These are the two reasons that that universal credits say you can still earn a bit before it affects your benefit payments. And this is how much. If you get help with housing costs, so if you get housing benefit under universal credit, you can earn up to £344 a month. If you do not get help with housing costs, you can earn up to £573 a month. So this is to reiterate that you can work and be on benefits. You can get access to work for that work as long as you earn under these amounts. And we do very similar to what Hijinks does with a lot of our artists who want it. We spread out payments for them. We act as an agency. We take funds on their behalf, and then we spread out payments so that they meet these monthly amounts. Okay, that's universal credit. This is employment support allowance. And this is their language. This is from the website. If you're disabled and if you're supported in work by a charity, you can do supported permitted work. So this is a bit more flexible than permitted work, and it's just a taster. I know Mind the Gap do this a lot more than we do, but just a taster. So to do this work, you need that PW1 form that I mentioned. And this means once you have that, it means that there's no limit to the number of hours you can work as long as it's supported permitted work with a charity. And you can earn, as Ben said, you can earn up to £152 per week and still get your employment support allowance payments. However, if you earn over £152 per week, even by £1, you might lose your benefits. So it's really important that you monitor that you spread out your payments. So on this, I'm going to wrap up now in a second. Again, it's just a taster, but this will give you a sense of if you get employment support allowance and you're earning that £152 per week and you're self-employed, I think £152 per week over 52 weeks over the whole year is just under £8,000. If you're self-employed, you need to earn above that lower earnings threshold, which is 6,200 and something pounds, and underneath this employment support allowance amount, which is just under £8,000. It's absolutely ridiculous. Nobody actually thought this through. There's no sense to it. The two government departments are completely separated, but it means that you can be earning that £152 per week and be getting access to work for self-employed work. And a reminder that if you're employed, you don't need to worry about that. You can work just a few hours if you want and still get access to work. Okay, so last little bit, some things to think about before you apply to access to work. And again, I know this is a lot of information. Usually this is a 2-hour training, so apologies, it's a taster. First off, read the guidance. On gov.uk, Google access to work, gov.uk, there is relatively well laid out guidance in there for at least the main information. Everything that I've gone through now, more or less, is in there. Know who needs to be part of the conversation. That first thing that I said, a company does not apply for access to work. The artist, a learning disabled or autistic artist applies for access to work. So please do not apply on somebody else's behalf. And if an artist has a legal guardian, maybe their parent is their legal guardian, then legally that person has to make the application. Whether you agree morally with that or not, access to work will have to speak to the legal guardian. So before you think of applying to access to work, make sure you have that conversation. Make sure you talk it all through with the artist, with any legal guardian they might have. Access to work will ask you what reasonable adjustments you have already made. Why should they give you the support? Why can't you as an employer provide that support? We often say things like, well, we have an access manager to manage our team of creative support. So that's our reasonable adjustment, for example. Know what benefits the artist is on. We're doing a lot of work with some people in the room around our Transforming Leadership project now, and a lot of the conversations, the time that it takes is to sit down with artists, their families, and just understand, okay, you're on universal credit, it's this rules, you're on employment support allowance, it's this rules, and just to look at those rules together so that everybody knows what that is, because it will slightly affect the access to work application. And then what we would suggest is it's all an online application, and actually the application online is quite straightforward. Again, it uses relatively easy English. Disability Arts Online, I think, have template applications online, I believe. And if not, I'm sure if you email them, they'll offer you one, or email us. I would draft the answers offline. So rather than doing it in the moment, go through it with an artist or their legal guardian, draft it all online before you go through the process online. Oh, that was the end. I thought I had another point. Finish mid-sentence. So that's that. A lot of information. The main things to recap is access to work can pay for one-to-one support. You can get it if you're employed or self-employed, and you can get it for interviews and auditions. Different rules if you're employed and self-employed. I think that being on an employment contract is easier, but obviously if you're an actor and you work different jobs, you might have to be on a self-employed contract. And then you can get it if you're on benefits. It's really, really useful. but there's certain rules around that you kind of have to jump through some hoops. And just to finish off, it's worth saying, to be completely transparent, this really works for us. We've been doing it for about 10 years now, and about £100,000 a year now of support costs goes through our books, and about the same amount of fees for learning disabled and autistic actors. So it works. It helps our actors to get work. It helps us to sustain that work, and most of those actors are still on benefits as well. So you don't have to come off benefits to work and get access to work support. And that is it for me. I shall hand back, I think, to Bojana.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Patrick. Patrick, Charlene, and Unique. Yeah, thanks so much for such a comprehensive summary of what seems to be a mind-bogglingly complex system. It's really very appreciated, I'm sure, by everyone here. We will now take a 5-minute break. It is now 5 minutes past 3, so let's meet again at 10 minutes past 3, and then we will hear from Alison and Julia from Mind the Gap. Thank you. Oh, Kafka, I know nothing, eh?
2007.
Sorry.
In 2007, I went to a workshop with Sakar, and I was invited to audition for the student programme, which was the following week, and I was successful. After 3 years as a student, I was then invited to join the artist group. And that means, so now I work as an artist, so that could be devising and performing company shows. But I'm also on a work placement, so I'm learning new skills all the time and seeing how the company works from an office perspective, as well as the performance perspective. Personally, I like to be busy. I hated the long summer holidays where all I had to do was twiddle my thumbs.
And what's, from your experience and view, Alison, what do you think are the biggest barriers for learning disabled and autistic artists when it comes to being paid for the work that you do?
I believe that of artists would love to be paid, but as you may have just heard from that explanation, the benefit system is complicated. So most work in the art sector is fairly hit and miss. You just don't know when your next job is going to come. So of course, if people for any reason lose the benefits, they can easily run out of money before they get the next job. And when you put that together with applying for benefits, it's not just complicated, it's stressful. So before I moved to a more flexible approach, I actually hated only being paid £20 per week, which is for lower permitted work limit, which anyone can earn regardless as to how capable otherwise they are. If you're learning disabled, you're going to get paid that much without any trouble. But when you get that much, it doesn't really feel like genuine work. You question it because you're only being paid a pittance for your work, regardless as to how much work you actually do.
And so what do you feel being paid a meaningful payment for the work that you do? What does that mean to you personally, Alison?
Well, being paid properly makes you feel like you're actually doing real work and it's valued. Not that I have a question of that from Mind the Gap's perspective, it ever isn't, but it kind of feels that way. And of course, if you get paid, it means you're not completely dependent on the benefit system. You've got other things to fall back on. Before now, I've actually been in and out of the benefits system when I can write to Yo-Yo because I'm very good at saving. And they say you can only save so much before you're taken off the benefit system. So sometimes I'd have to stop getting benefits, wait a while, just to make sure that my savings would run down to an acceptable level before reapplying. And yes, over that time, the benefit system changed. So I've now been on income support, employment and support allowance, and of course, most recently, universal credit. And the assessment of my disability and needs could potentially change because it's a different system. I haven't always been treated fairly. I've actually had to appeal when I was applying for universal credit. So yeah, great system, love it. Not. Since leaving school, I actually wanted to work, and I even tried to get regular work, but that just didn't happen. And whilst on benefits, I became more and more aware that it was taxpayers' money which was actually being paid to me, and that just makes you feel like a burden to society. So being able to earn money to be off benefits means I'm no longer a burden. I can treat myself occasionally, but given I've never been extravagant, I really don't think I'll actually just change my habits overnight. But I just feel more financially secure. Julia, what is the company Mind the Gap's approach to pay learning disabled and autistic artists?
So thanks, Alison, for sharing those reflections. So like our colleagues and Ben, for example, explained at Hijinks, Mind the Gap has used a number of different strategies depending on the situation and the circumstances at a given time. So we've done the hop on, hop off benefits. We've worked within permitted work payments, which we still do. And then we've also had people on shorter and longer term contracts, depending on the nature of the work involved. But today is actually, by complete chance, is the 26th anniversary since I started work with the company in 1997. And I can honestly say that it has been one of the most vexing issues since day one. And so in 2018, we commissioned Vicky Ackroyd of Totally Inclusive People to do some research, which involved talking across a number of different people across Mind the Gap, including artists, parents and primary guardians and staff, including myself, but also other members of staff across the team. And Vicky also spoke with 6 other companies who work in the same area, including some of the colleagues who are here today. And just to say this out loud, what that revealed, that I think what we already knew, was that there's no one size fits all approach that's going to work for everyone. So actually what you need to do is take a kind of quite nuanced and one-to-one approach. So we decided on the back of the sort of consolidating, I suppose, some of the knowledge and experience we'd already have, that we would do one-to-one reviews with all of our core artists and come up with a tailored solution for each person. It is quite complex, but just to sort of try and summarize, I mean, we consider all of the employment that we do with Mind the Gap some form of supported employment as a general rule. And we do work with supported permitted work quite extensively with those who are on employment support allowance. And we also work with people on universal credit, although not as many people as one might have expected have moved over to universal credit in our experience within our network of people. What sort of, again, I think there's lots of people in the virtual room today who will already know this, but just to sort of say it out loud again, is that however much companies like Hijinks, Mind the Gap, Access All Areas and other colleagues here, however much we innovate around this issue of artist payments, there's always there are some kind of quite fundamental barriers which exist. and none of those look likely to change anytime soon. So firstly, there's the short-term nature of the majority of arts work, and that work is generally low paid. That's not exclusive, obviously, to learning disabled and autistic artists, but that is a nature of the industry that we work in. The second issue is that the benefit system is sort of predicated on a number of assumptions. And one of those is that people with a learning disability will, at best, kind of do the kind of work that's ongoing and routine. So every Tuesday afternoon and every Thursday morning, for example, over an extended period of time. And so a lot of the systems are kind of based on that model, which again isn't in line with a lot of the experience of people working in the arts. Thirdly, the benefit system is full of vague, ambiguous language, like this could happen, this may happen. And that is one of the factors that creates a lot of confusion, and also contributes to people feeling fearful around change. And that was certainly something that is very evident in our one-to-one reviews that we've done over the last few years, and that's not going away. And one of the reasons it's not going away is that people often have quite unhelpful and sometimes overtly hostile experiences working, engaging with the benefit system, particularly when they want to enter into conversations around potential change. And I think just finally on that, when trying to make change and advancements, there may be certain risks and considerations for us as employer organisations, but fundamentally all the risk lies with the individual artist involved. They are going to be the ones who, if things don't go to plan, are going to end up worse off in often very stressful situations. So there's a number of things which in combination, you know, make a cumulative effect of those are to be quite significant barriers to change. So what we've kind of tried to do is take that learning and those challenges and look at what we think needs to change in order for things to improve. So one of the things that we suggest that is essentially potentially quite a modest and achievable change is to move to a situation where an individual's earnings are calculated over a year rather than taking an individual snapshot in time when somebody steps into, for example, a 12-week contract to do a touring project, which might in that 12 weeks yield, I don't know, for the sake of argument, £6,000 or £7,000, but might be the only work that somebody has in that time period. And in a sense, this is no different from a freelancer doing a self-assessment tax form, which is done annually. So there is a similar kind of custom and practice that already exists within the taxation system. So we think that there should be potential for actually us to think differently and specifically, again, not just necessarily for the benefit of learning disabled and autistic artists, but this is something that could benefit the wider arts and creative sector as well. And we'd also like to see the language and the information being presented in a less ambiguous and more straightforward way, and for there to be far less use of words like may and could, and linked to this, for benefits advisors to be informed and consistent in their approach. Again, one of our findings, and I know this is shared by other organisations as well, and other individuals, is that people can receive quite inconsistent information. And so even within the same authority, somebody can speak to a benefits advisor and get one set of advice, and then somebody else can speak to somebody else and get a very different perspective on it. So more consistency and transparency around that would be of great help, we think, to trying to move people away from benefits and into meaningful paid work. So we've been kind of discussing and doing some action in various ways about who else we need to get involved in order to make change happen. So I'm going to bring Alison back in now. Alison, do you want to kind of kick off with some thoughts about who else we need to get involved in this?
Well, one obvious group of people are politicians, because they're the ones who can actually make change on national issues, like how the DWP works. So if we all write to our own MPs, and lots of people take the same ideas to their own local MPs, maybe they'll listen and take action. And let's face it, for more to say it to them, for more they should think, maybe I should actually really consider this.
Thanks, Alison. Yeah, and one of the other areas we've thought about is who represents people in the arts sector and how might we get them involved. So we'd like to see big agencies like Arts Council England doing more to bring positive influence with people in high places that they have access to, like Department of Culture, Media and Sport within as government, key government agency that funds the arts and creative sector. And Ben mentioned about equity providing some helpful information about case studies. And so we wonder whether there's more that we could do to engage a big union like Equity in the call for change, which would be facilitated if we could get enough of our actors to performers to be signed up and active union members of Equity. Back to you, Alison.
Well, you also have various charities out there. So you've got big charities like Medicap, who do lots of advocacy work around employment, but so far they haven't directed that specifically towards the arts. And one of the first learning disabled groups I was aware of was People First. They have groups all around the country and they campaign for learning disabled rights.
Yeah, and linked to that, we wonder whether there's more to harness the agency of people who are also working with people with a learning disability and autism, thinking about things like social care and health workers, for example. And we'd like to see them being more proactive in how they support people into independence, including paid work, and to be more informed and more active around employment rights for people with disabilities. So, we know that these things take a lot of time and effort, and we know that they're not easy, because if they were, we'd already have done it by now. But hopefully by opening up kind of conversations like this and getting people involved and thinking about it, we hope that we could harness some of that to kind of collaborate and bring about more positive change in this area. So we're going to pause there and hand back to Bojana and hope that we've given food for thought to feed into any questions or comments from the wider circle involved here.
Certainly have, Julia and Alison. Thank you so much. Especially, I think your, practice-informed visions of the things that should change at various different levels. I think do the complexity of the broader field really justice. So thank you so much for taking time to join us. We now have an excellent just over, actually nearly 30 minutes for questions. So if you would like to ask any of our speakers any questions, please raise your hand or pop it in the chat and I will read it out. And if I omit anything, please don't be shy to shout. Maybe while attendees gather their thoughts, there is actually a question I would like to ask. Several of you mentioned equity as kind of like helpful source of advice. So equity is the Actors and Performers trade union. I have in my research also come across critical views on equity in the sense of membership in equity being conditional on having received paid employment. So some of the actors with whom I spoke felt that they were kind of like excluded from equity, and therefore this kind of like symbol of being a professional artist, because they've never had paid employment. They couldn't get paid employment because of all these issues we've discussed. So yeah, I was just wondering if anyone would like to comment on that potentially ambivalent role equity plays.
I can say something.
Yes, thanks, Ben.
They were helpful in terms of that when we went to them with the particular issue we had around payment for our artist and finding that piece of case law. And at that time, actually, we were in discussions over other areas of the work that we do and connections to equity. I think coming out of the pandemic, there was a real kind of push from equity to have those conversations about how our artists, how it's more accessible for our artists to become part of the union. As far as I remember, the issue, which was the sticky point for them, was an insurance question. Because to be a member of equity, one of the benefits you receive is performance insurance, and their insurer there was issues with the insurer covering some of our artists because of their kind of requirements as an insurance company. So Ian Manboard, I think, if he's still there, I'm not sure where the conversations went. But it might. We'll try and follow it up and see where that went. Our casting agent Ellen is on maternity leave at the moment, and she was very much kind of at the forefront of those conversations and would have access to the information. But I'll kind of try and follow it up and see where we got to on that, because it was something we were discussing. I mean, it'd be interesting to hear from other people about any difficulties they've had with artists becoming recognised by equity and joining.
Thank you, Ben. Really sort of like not surprising, but shocking to hear about issues such as insurance. And I think this maybe kind of like directs us to all these kind of like disabling practices, how deeply they are structurally embedded with, like insurances and agencies, and kind of like, the notion of learning disabled or autistic artists kind of like occupying those spaces is just not embedded in the thinking that permeates it, right? Thank you. I don't know if anyone else wanted to address any questions around equity or share any experiences with working with the trade union equity. So just to interject, so Unlimited have just posted in the chat that they're glad to hear that the vouchers option many of us relied on for years has gone and also been made illegal. Oh, that's interesting. Unlimited, would you like to comment on, because the vouchers, even though obviously ethically problematic, I wasn't aware that it was illegal now.
Hi. I've got a cold, so I'm not looking my best. We, like many people, offered vouchers for people who couldn't accept payments for a period of time, but we've been very clearly instructed now that anything over 50 quid, which can be seen as a token amount, is fraud, because you're just offering payment in a way in a different way, and you are clearly, so it's a clear way of trying to circumnavigate the issue, and that has now been picked up. It was always a really hard one, because it's something that people really wanted as a way, because it kept the two things really clear and clean for them. But I'm really pleased that it hasn't been talked about today as an option, simply because it has now been shown not to be something that is a legal one.
Sure, thanks for pointing that out, because I think also in the research community, vouchers are often used to, as you say, circumnavigate all these issues. And I have heard from people, from actors within my research, who also felt that it was quite demeaning to be kind of like given this kind of payment at the same time as it being welcome, because it does, or it did to an extent, make things easier. Thank you. We have a chat message here from Suzanne Loftus from Cutting Edge Theatre. Suzanne says, we managed to get access to work for an artist last year on tour, and managed to get costs covered for travel and hotel accommodation for support workers also, which was a real help. Oh, that's brilliant to hear. So Suzanne, that is the sort of like strategy and scheme that Patrick elaborated on earlier. So it is good to hear that other companies have been successfully using it too. Thank you.
Yeah, so we're based in Scotland. I'm assuming a lot of the things are the same. Actually, it's a UK, UK benefits. I'd love to say I understood access to work. We were very fortunate to get a really good advisor on the other side who loved theatre. So he was brilliant and kind of kept saying, so maybe you need to up the rate of pay there. And there was wow. You know, he said have a different rate of pay for support worker driver, a support worker within the theatre and rehearsals. So, you know, those were two different rates of pay. It was quite complex, and we had to work out a very big spreadsheet on when they were doing support within the theatre, when they were driving, when they were, it was a very complex, everybody's saying the paperwork was incredible. But now we have a spreadsheet, now we would use that again. But it was when I went back to him, he said, oh, no, I should have told you, you can get hotel accommodation and travel mileage on that. So, and we just had to summarize an invoice rather than doing lots of individual invoices for lots of, we had about 4 support workers on that tour. So yeah, I still have to write up the notes and try to make sure I understand how I did it so that we can do it again. But I have a very complex spreadsheet, which I'm happy to share with anyone.
Oh, thank you so much, Suzanne. In fact, I will now, before reading out Sam's next question, I will put my email in the chat box now. So anyone who would like to be kept abreast of what will hopefully be an ongoing conversation oriented also towards lobbying and campaigning as set out by, as Julia and Alison have highlighted, but also to get access all areas, brilliant slides. And perhaps Suzanne, if you are happy to share your spreadsheet, so anyone who wants any extra materials, please email me. I am putting my address in the chat box now. Jackie, great, there it goes. Thank you. We have a question from Sam, but I can also see Patrick, your hand is up. Is this in response to Suzanne's? Okay, so Sam, if that's okay with you, can we hear from Patrick, and then I will read out your question.
Sorry to butt in. I'll be quick.
That's cool.
That's great.
Just to say, Suzanne, that sounds amazing that you got such a good advisor, and I would absolutely love, and as our access administrator, would love to see that spreadsheet. I think when we have done that, where there's different costs for different types of support workers, we've just put in the highest one in the application, and it gets accepted. And then if you underclaim in the end, fine. But we've been told by a helpful advisor, if it sounds like your process is better, but if you can't quite get into that detail, just put the highest hourly rate in and hopefully they'll approve it. And then once that pot of money is there and available, if you claim less, that's not a problem, but you can't claim any more than it, I think. And we usually, one thing I didn't say as well, they'll ask for 3 quotes for things like hotels and accommodation. Just whatever quote you need, make that the cheapest one, and then find 2 more expensive things. So anytime they ask for 3 quotes, just, you know, if you need a quote from Access All Areas, for example, just email us. We do that with other companies, and we'll say, this is what our support workers cost. And that will be more expensive than whatever you actually need to pay. That was all I was going to say. And I have another point for later for Julia as well. So I'll lower my hand and then I'll put it up again.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Patrick.
Just to add to that, sorry, just to add
Sure,
to that,
sure.
that's absolutely right. So we weren't very sure on rates for a support worker. So we kind of went in fairly low. And again, he was really good. He came back to us and said, is that really the rate? I think you should have a higher rate for when they're actually supporting within rehearsal or within in the venue. So that was really good. So, you know, contact, I suppose this is what this meeting is. It's about talking to each other and kind of maybe if there, I don't know if we could even get something published or a sheet or something that says a rate card for support workers, creative support workers would be really good for us to have. That then we can refer to this as being industry standard, because we were plucking support workers from people who don't work in the creative arts and taking their rate, you know, which was minimum rate of pay, and it was shocking. So maybe an industry rate would be good for us.
That's a good shout. We can share ours, that's no problem.
Thank you. So Sam, sorry, has posted in the chat the question. So in the United States, we have heard that artists have been able to set up trust funds to pay into and draw down money over time. Is there anything like this people have heard of here in the UK? Julia?
Yeah, so yes, at Mind the Gap, we have run something in this kind of model in the past. I would say that it is difficult. I think on an ethical level, it's challenging because you have to put restrictions on that mean that, so in our model, it was we had to work within the charitable auspices of Mind the Gap, our overall memorandum and articles of association of what our charity is set up to do. So if I get paid, I can go and buy a bottle of gin, but that was not necessarily the case for using the resource that was, that was rightly owed to an individual artist. So there were certain kind of limitations on that. The other area which is problematic is that it is essentially tax evasion. As Joe from Unlimited was saying, vouchers essentially is a bypassing the system, and this can be seen in the same way. So it was actually an auditor from a number of years ago who sort of said to us, nah, I think you should reconsider how you do this, because actually you could, with an unhelpful view on this, both the individual and the company could find themselves on the receiving end of an allegation of tax evasion. So I understand the principles of it, but if you would have to look at it very, very carefully, I think, to look at how you could run something in a way that was legal and ethical. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Yeah, it truly is, Julia. Thank you. Patrick, your hand is raised.
I was just going to come in on that as well. It's very much not the same thing, but our kind of, as Julia put it well, the sort of our innovation around this of just trying to work around the grey areas, which I think Hijinks talked about a bit as well, is the idea of spreading out payments. So if I think what we have been advised, and we have it in writing from job centres and individual DWP advisors, we have been advised that it is okay to spread out payments as long as it doesn't go over the kind of the annual amount that that people are allowed to earn before it affects their benefits. But it's a very grey area, and you know, we do take a risk on that. We just fall back on the legal advice, or the written advice that we've been given from the job centres of individual people, to kind of claim innocence, I suppose, then. But that would be my bodge job version of the kind of the trust fund, is accessible areas will hold these monies for you, and as your agent, and spread out payments then over a series of weeks.
Thank you, Patrick.
I was just going to throw in a separate point, if that's all right, if there isn't another one, just quick.
Please do.
Julia, I loved the kind of 3 points or so of the vision statement of what needs to change, I suppose, in terms of earnings calculated over time and that kind of thing. And I just wanted to throw in another suggestion for that as well, of that when it comes to access to work, with our access to work hat on, scrapping that lower earnings limit for self-employed people, because it's a real hurdle that you have to go from nothing to earning £6,200 a year before you're allowed to get access to work. So what I did say is that the first year of that, you don't need that in the first year, but if you're likely to be doing a job like 1 day a week of a job or a half a day a week of a job, you might not hit that threshold, and I think it's very unfair. So that would be my other point to add into that.
Yes, it is an excellent point. In fact, I remember during your presentation thinking, no income threshold in the first year is great, but then it does jump quite rapidly, and especially, I guess, then as much as access to work sounds as quite a helpful, if somewhat complicated way into facilitating payment, it still seems to create this kind of like in-between situation. So what then happens to people who earn only £3,000? I mean, what would happen to those people, Patrick?
Okay, don't put this on YouTube.
Nothing's going on
two
YouTube.
Answers.
What happens in the boardroom stays in the boardroom.
Sure. The official answer that we talked about in our presentation, if they're employed, that's absolutely fine. And that's what we're trying to do now, as we're working with people more and more who will just earn a small amount over a long term, if that makes sense. We put them in an employment contract, it seems to be absolutely fine. What we have done in that case is you apply for access to work, you say, okay, in the first year, they're only going to earn £3,000. Then it gets to the end of the first year. Once you're in the system with a grant approved, they'll come back to you and say, okay, are you now earning the lower earnings threshold, whatever that is? We have managed to argue a few times of like, look, it's going to take another year because of this and this reason, or it's for these reasons, we haven't quite hit that yet, but it is still a viable business. Here are all the contracts, and it's worked. And that's kind of, again, depends what advisor you get, a very gray area, but it has worked for us. And this is especially during the COVID years as well. It's worked for us to say, this person hasn't quite made it yet, but, you know, still working. And thankfully, 4 years later, they still have access to work. So I think because it's a really disorganized system, because access to work is really disorganized and nobody knows what they're talking about, you can, once you're in the system, it's easier to keep hold of it, I think.
Well, that's really helpful. Thank you so much, Patrick. Julia.
Yeah, and just to add to, I suppose, that sort of point as well, the complexity of it makes it more challenging and creates barriers and inertia for organisations working outside of the specialist area of organisations like us. So we have a very good partnership with a very good relationship with Leeds Playhouse, which is a producing theatre in Leeds, a neighbouring city to Bradford. But really open and willing to have conversations with us about positive movement in this, but these additional requirements of needing a sort of an individual artist, needing that kind of expert backup, and it being complicated to say, I've been doing this for a long time, and I also kind of go, oh, the access to work advisor's going to ring me today, and I feel a sense of trepidation around it, because it does just feel I feel vulnerable in that situation, because I think, oh gosh, if I say the wrong thing, and they do work within an extremely medical, an extreme medical model framework. So it's just like one slip of the tongue can end up with you not, ending up undermining somebody's case. So that all of this kind of means that looking outside of the kind of specialist kind of organizations who are predominantly make up the audience today, you're creating another area where you're just not going to see it, you're bit busy, and particularly, again, smaller arts organisations who are interested in inclusive casting and involving people with a learning disability and autism within their cast. Again, there's a very heavy reliance on the specialism of organisations like us. It creates a kind of dependency relationship as well across all of the parties involved. It makes the artist dependent on the specialist agency. It makes their parents and carers often quite dependent. It makes the partner organisations quite dependent, and it isn't necessarily the best dynamic for affecting long-term change.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Julia. I mean, one of the things that's so reoccurring, and we were all nodding here, and it really came out of our research, that people, no matter how much expertise they have, there is always this kind of like fear. And then ultimately, when we think about, the goals of valuing people, for example, that should still be relevant, supporting people into independence and work, etc. And here you're saying that new dependencies are created because it is actually the government who is not providing reliable advice, right? Patrick has his hand raised, I believe.
Ben, you were going to say something before me, have you?
Oh, sorry.
I took it down because I thought we'd already covered. It was just the administration and the resources that have to go into all of that, the expertise that is within the organizations when our actors get jobs outside of our organization and inside when they're working with us. It's currently, for ourselves at least, it's something we're really looking into, how we resource that fully. And we've been really kind of hit, if you like, with 2 actors particularly getting jobs at exactly the same time for extended periods of time for these both productions taking place in England. And we've not been in a situation before where we've had that level of creative enablers and all the other logistics that go around supporting those artists to take those jobs happening at the same time. And so it has a knock-on effect for other areas of the work that we do, because it just sucks in so much staff time. Sarah, I don't know if you want to, we've got Sarah here as well, who's our CEO, who's more au fait with that side of things and our plans for tackling it as well. I don't know if you want to say something, Sarah.
Yeah, I think we're obviously all on a bit of a learning curve on all of this. Each time we have a new scenario, a new kind of job, new kind of support kind of framework that's needed, we have to figure out how to do that. And certainly the last 3 or 4 months have been extraordinary in the amount of time that it's taken to make that happen, because we're not content to hope it'll be okay. We need to make sure that it absolutely is set up and right and appropriate for our artists. So yeah, that is certainly very challenging, and we're reworking our business model now, because we recognize that no one else is going to do this for us. It is going to fall to us, so we do have to kind of lean further into it and look at how we can resource roles and get the right skills and experience into the team to do that and support the artists and their families.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank you. Patrick.
Yeah, well, I was actually going to talk on this same point. So first off, because of this reason, because it takes so much resource, we decided quite a few years ago to have a specific company of associate artists. So now we have 17 associate artists that we kind of commit to supporting through all of this process. And to be honest, if a job comes up that somebody else outside of that company is potentially up for, we do our best to support, but we make it very clear, look, we just can't give the same type of resource to it. But what is really good, and what I didn't talk about in the access to work bit, just because of time, what has really helped our resourcing of this is that you can charge more than just the support costs for access to work. And this is gold dust for us. So our associate artists, if they want to hire a creative support worker, they hire Access All Areas as a support worker. So Access All Areas is the support worker. We get paid by access to work. So therefore, it's earned income to us. It's not a grant. That means that we can charge the admin time as well. So kind of arbitrarily, sort of we just came up with this ourselves, kind of on the agency model. For any day of work that a support worker gets paid, Access All Areas gets paid 20% of that from access to work. And what's that's done is that it pays for our access administrator, who is now more of an expert than me on all of this. So her full-time job is to deal with benefits, access to work, and issues around finance and managing money. So it's a huge, it takes a while, but that little bit extra commission has been really, really helpful, and it helps that resource a little bit. Again, it's a bodge job. It's not solving the root problem, but it can be helpful in the process, I think. And then the last little bit thing I was going to say as well, on your point, Julia, I had an actual breakdown and burnout from access to work calls. Incredibly stressful. I got called on Christmas Eve once, and again by the same advisor on the day after Christmas, and I completely lost my temper with him. You can insist on only communicating in emails. So they will try and call you. You can just say, put the phone down, you say, you have my email address, you need to email me. They will also try to call the artist or their legal guardian. They have a right to a third party advocate, which is me or now our access administrator. So that they just need to hear from the artist or from the legal guardian, yes, I want you to speak to Access All Areas, and I want it to be by email, and then they're allowed to communicate with you. So don't be put off if an advisor says, no, I can only speak to the person applying. It's not true. That's all.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Ben, we slightly run over, but yeah.
Just quickly, I think it's like what's really pertinent from everything, in terms of access to work, but also in dealing with the DWP and those conversations that we end up in. You have to be more of an expert than the people on the other end.
100%.
That takes a huge amount of research, of learning, of time, but that's the key, isn't it? You have to become more of an expert than the people that you will be speaking to on the other end. That's what's so tricky about it. One of the things that's so tricky about it. So that you can, you are making those corrections when they are telling you something. But to be able to do that takes so much time.
Which I think quite clearly frames, the kind of like helpfulness that's provided there. Right, so it's just after 4, and I think people will have to leave. So while we still have some people here in the room, I would really like to thank you so much for sharing so generously and really courageously from your practice, because as we've just heard, these are quite tricky areas, not that they should be, but they are. I have, as I said before, put my email address in the chat box. Please send me an email and we will put you on a mailing list. You can receive Access All Areas slides, but also we are really hoping to take this conversation further and think about lobbying for changes and organizing So if you want to be kept informed of any changes or actions, please email. I would like to thank you all so much for speaking and attending. Thank you to Amanda for providing closed captions for this event. And huge thanks to the Welcome Center operations team who helped with admin and tech, and without whom I would have just embarrassed myself, absolutely. We have thanks here. Yes, thank you. And I hope this isn't the last we hear from each other. Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.